Imagine that two people enter the same animal shelter. They walk down the same corridors. They hear the same sounds. They see exactly the same dogs and the same cats. But something curious happens. One of them smiles immediately when a dog runs towards her, wags its tail and seems to say, "Let's play." The other woman barely notices the dog. Her eyes are fixed on a cat sitting silently, observing everything from a distance. There was no call. No plea for attention. Just a look. And for some reason it seems familiar. Both people believe they made a choice. But what if the choice had been made much earlier than that moment? What if the animal you feel an immediate connection with reveals not only what you like, but also how your brain has learned to seek security? Because maybe you've never had to choose between dogs and cats. Perhaps it was your nervous system choosing the environment where you can finally rest. If this type of depth psychology sparks your curiosity and you enjoy understanding why we feel the way we feel, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Every week we explore how the human mind works in a simple, practical, and psychology-based way. Most people believe they prefer dogs because they are more affectionate, or cats because they are more independent. This explanation seems to make sense, until you look at the psychology. Because when researchers study personality, attachment styles, emotional regulation, and individual differences, one thing starts to appear repeatedly. We're not just looking for company. We seek emotional states. This completely changes the conversation. The real issue was never the animal. The real issue has always been you. Perhaps you've already noticed this without being able to explain it. There are people who come home after a hard day and feel like talking, walking, playing, sharing energy. Others simply want a few minutes of silence. Neither of them is wrong. In fact, they are both trying to do exactly the same thing. Regulate your own nervous system. For a long time, it was believed that resting meant the same thing for everyone. Today we know that's not true. Some people regain energy through interaction. Others recover energy by reducing stimuli. It's as if there are different paths to reach the same destination, the feeling of security. And perhaps that's why two people living the same routine have completely different needs when they get home. While one feels the need for movement to relieve stress, the other feels she needs to turn down the volume of the world. None of them are exaggerating. Their brains simply learn different ways to exit the state of alert. This is where most people begin to misinterpret themselves. Those who need silence often hear that it's cold. Those who need constant companionship often hear that they are dependent. But these explanations ignore one of the most important characteristics of human psychology: the context in which our nervous system learned to feel safe. Our childhood, our experiences, the environments in which we grow up, the relationships we had. All of this shapes what our brain comes to recognize as familiar. And there's a fascinating curiosity about the word familiar. The brain doesn't always seek what's best for us. First, he looks for what he knows. Because what is known seems predictable. And predictability usually means security. That's why two people can react in completely different ways to the same situation. While someone feels comfortable in an environment full of conversation, laughter, and movement, another person begins to feel a tiredness that they can't even explain. Not because he's antisocial, but that's because your brain is processing much more information at the same time. Facial expressions, voice tone, emotional changes, noise, lights, parallel conversations. For some minds, all of this is stimulating. For others, all of this is exhausting. And this difference does not determine who is more intelligent, stronger, or more balanced. It simply reveals that our nervous systems were calibrated in different ways. This is exactly where dogs and cats cease to be just animals and begin to function as emotional mirrors. They represent two very different types of presence. And when you understand this difference, you might start to see your own relationships in a completely new way. Because perhaps you've never just looked for one animal. Perhaps I've always been searching for a feeling. Perhaps that's why some people describe the presence of a dog as a shot of life, while others describe the presence of a cat as bringing a sense of peace. None of these descriptions are actually talking about the animal. They are describing what happens inside them. It's a subtle difference, but it completely transforms the way we understand our preferences. There is a very important concept in psychology called emotional regulation. In simple terms, it means the brain's ability to return to equilibrium after experiencing stress, fear, pressure, or overload. We all do it. The difference lies in the path each person takes to get there. Some minds regain stability through movement, others through stillness. Think of someone who spent the entire day solving problems, attending meetings, and making decisions. When they finally get home, this person may feel an almost irresistible urge to walk, play, or simply be around someone full of positive energy. Not because I'm running away from silence, but because your brain reduces stress through active connectivity. Now imagine another person living through the exact same day. She's tired too. It's also overloaded. But when she opens the front door, the only thing she wants is a few minutes without anyone expecting anything from her. No questions asked. No charges. No need to talk. No need to explain how the day went. Your brain doesn't need any more stimulation. You need less. And here's where something interesting happens. For years, society interpreted these differences as personality traits. She is extroverted. He is an introvert. While there is some truth to it, this explanation is still superficial. Because before personality, there is biology. There is the nervous system. There is a way in which our brain has learned to distinguish between safety and threat. That's why some people walk into a party full of music and immediately feel the energy, while others, after only 20 minutes, begin to wish they could go back home. None of them consciously chose that reaction. It happens first in the body. Only then does the mind create an explanation. Perhaps you've already experienced this. You leave a social gathering completely exhausted, but your friend seems even more excited than when he arrived. For a long time, this made many people believe that there was something wrong with themselves. As if I needed to learn to like people more, or learn to be more sociable. But perhaps that was never the question. Perhaps the correct question is, what brings my brain back into balance? This question changes everything, because she stops looking for flaws, and he begins to look for needs. It is precisely at this point that dogs and cats represent two very different styles of emotional presence. For many people, a dog symbolizes something that psychology calls active co-regulation. He invites, answer, share energy. His constant enthusiasm sends signals to the brain about connection, predictability, and companionship. For people whose nervous system finds stability through interaction, this can be profoundly restorative. They don't just like the dog's energy. They need it at certain times. It's as if that movement were telling the brain, you are not alone. Life is happening. Now consider the other extreme. There are people whose brains have spent a good part of their lives monitoring their environment, noticing mood swings, anticipating conflicts, trying to prevent problems before they even happen. These people often live in a state of silent vigilance. They don't always realize it, but their bodies notice. When they finally find an environment where no one demands immediate answers, something changes. The shoulders relax, breathing slows down, thoughts begin to slow down. Not because everything has been resolved, but because, for the first time that day, the brain understands that it doesn't need to remain on alert. That's why so many people describe silence as something profoundly restorative, while others find it uncomfortable. Even silence isn't good for everyone. Interaction isn't good for everyone. It all depends on how your nervous system has learned to recognize safety. And perhaps that's precisely why so many people say something that seems strange. I like animals more than I like people. When we hear that phrase, we tend to picture someone antisocial. But more often than not, that's not the whole story. What many of these people really mean is something else. I feel less pressured. I don't need to play a role. I don't need to hide who I am. I can simply exist. Do you realize how this no longer has anything to do with dogs or cats? It has to do with a profoundly human need. The need to belong without feeling that one needs to deserve that belonging. And when someone encounters that feeling, the brain registers it. He learns. He starts looking for that type of environment again. Because, above all, our nervous system is always looking for places where it can finally let its guard down. If this makes sense to you so far, please like the video. And tell me in the comments, have you always identified more with dogs, with cats? Or do you feel you need both at different times in your life? I really want to read about your experience because it can help other people understand themselves better. There's one question that always comes up whenever this topic arises. And who loves them both? Interestingly, this is perhaps the most interesting question of all. Because the answer is usually not indecision. In fact, it may reveal something much deeper. For a long time we believed that our personality needed to fit into categories. Extrovert or introvert. Emotional or rational. Sociable or reserved. But modern psychology shows that human beings are much more flexible than that. We adapt according to the context. We change with age. We change after losses. We change after relationships. We change after experiences that transform the way our brain perceives safety. Perhaps you've already noticed this in your own life. There was a time when you needed to be surrounded by people. Today, tranquility is valued much more. Or perhaps the exact opposite happened. You spent years trying to solve everything on your own, until he discovered that he also needed a connection. This doesn't mean that his personality has changed completely. It means that your emotional needs have evolved. And that's exactly why some people love dogs as much as they love cats. Not because they can't decide, but because each one offers a different kind of balance. At certain times in life, our brain needs to recover energy. In others, it's necessary to regain trust in the world. There are days when all we need is movement. Someone who can make us get off the couch, going for a walk, breathe fresh air. Remember that joy still exists. But there are also days when any stimulus seems too much. Days when the body asks for nothing more than silence, presence, breathing, space. None of these needs negates the other. In fact, they complement each other. And perhaps that is exactly what so many people were trying to explain when they said, I love them both but for completely different reasons. Do you see how this ceases to be a preference for animals? We're talking about emotional flexibility, about recognizing what your nervous system needs at each stage of life. This also helps to understand another very common situation. Why do some people stop recognizing themselves? Perhaps you've already thought, I used to love going out. Today I prefer to stay home. Or else. Before, I needed to be alone. Now I miss having company. Most of the time, it's not because you've lost your essence. That's because your brain is trying to compensate for what's missing. We do this all the time without realizing it. We seek environments that restore what has been drained. After a period of great stress, we began to seek calm. After a long period of isolation, we begin to crave connection. After months of overwhelming responsibility, we feel like playing again. Our brain is constantly seeking balance. This is perhaps one of the most beautiful aspects of human nature. We weren't made to stay the same forever. We were made to adapt. And this adaptation also appears in the way we build our relationships. Think for a moment about the people who make you feel completely at ease. They probably have one thing in common. You don't feel like you need to play a character. There's no need to measure every word. You don't need to hide your insecurities. You simply exist. This feeling has a name in psychology. Psychological safety. It is a state in which the brain reduces its vigilance because it understands that there is no immediate social threat. When that happens, something extraordinary also happens. Our creativity increases. Our ability to reflect improves. We've become more patient, more curious, more gifts. It's interesting to note that almost no one consciously seeks out this feeling. People often say they are looking for love, success, recognition, belonging. But behind all of this, there is a much older need. To feel safe. Because a brain in a constant state of threat can hardly enjoy anything else. Perhaps that's why some of the happiest memories of our lives seem so simple. A peaceful late afternoon. A walk. A conversation without any rush. Or simply sharing the same space with someone, without having to say absolutely anything. Ultimately, what makes these moments unforgettable is not what happened. It's how our bodies felt while they were happening. And when we understand that, we started asking a completely different question. Instead of asking, what do I like? We now ask, what makes my nervous system feel at home? This is perhaps one of the most important questions anyone can ask themselves. Because the response doesn't just transform the relationship with an animal. It transforms the relationship with work, with friends, with relationships, and most importantly, with myself. Perhaps that's exactly why so many people spend years trying to change their own personality, when, in fact, what they really need is to understand their own nervous system. There's a huge difference between growing up and living trying to be someone you've never been. Imagine someone who spends their entire life believing they need to talk more, go out more, being available all the time, accept all invitations, because she learned that this is what it means to be a healthy person. Now imagine discovering that the problem was never about liking silence. The problem was feeling guilty for needing him. Do you notice the difference? Self-knowledge is not about discovering a new version of yourself. It's about stopping the fight against something that has always existed. That's why understanding how we seek security changes everything. You begin to understand why certain environments drain your energy, why some people make you breathe easier. Why do other things put your body on alert even when they seem gentle? Your brain is reading signals all the time, long before you consciously realize it. That's exactly how our perception of safety works. First, the body responds. Then the mind creates a story to explain that feeling. Perhaps that's why you've said so many times, I can't explain it, but I feel good around this person. Or else, there's something here that makes me uncomfortable. Most of the time, your nervous system perceives patterns before your conscious awareness. That doesn't mean he's infallible. Trauma, difficult experiences, and past relationships also influence this perception. But it means that it's worth paying more attention to the messages your own body sends. because he often perceives things that the mind takes longer to understand. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson that dogs and cats can offer us. Not about them. About us. They remind us that security is not an abstract concept. It's an experience. It's something we feel in our hearts, in breathing, our muscles, at the speed of thought. When we find environments that are compatible with who we truly are, our body responds, effortless, without convincing anyone, without needing to prove anything. It's curious to think that we live in a culture that admires intensity. The busier you are, the better. The more productive, the better. The more connected you are, the better. But few people ask something far more important. What truly makes you feel alive, without feeling drained? This answer is different for each person. And that's okay. Because emotional health doesn't mean living the same way as everyone else. It means building a life that is compatible with the brain you have. Perhaps some people will find this by walking a dog at sunrise. Others find this by reading a book while a cat sleeps beside them. And some find both things at different times in their lives. The animal was never the important thing. What has always been important is the feeling it evokes. Because ultimately, what most transforms our emotional health is not the amount of stimuli around us. It's the quality of security that we feel while we live. So, the next time someone asks if you prefer dogs or cats, perhaps the truest answer isn't the name of an animal. Perhaps this is how you learn to find peace. Because maybe you've never loved a dog simply for the joy it brings. Not even a cat, just for the tranquility it offers. Perhaps you loved the way they allowed you to be who you truly are. No masks. Poor performance. Without needing to explain why your heart works differently. And perhaps that is one of the greatest discoveries in psychology. We don't spend our whole lives searching for places. We seek emotional states. We are looking for people, experiences, environments, and sometimes even animals. May they make our nervous system silently say, "You can rest now." If this video made you look at yourself in a different way, leave a like and share in the comments. Did you identify more with those who need the energy of dogs, the tranquility of cats? Or did you realize that, at different stages of life, you needed both? I love reading these stories because they show how each mind finds its own path to security. And if you enjoyed this reflection, I'm sure you'll enjoy the video that's playing on your screen now. In it, we'll explore another fascinating aspect of human psychology that can change how you understand yourself and your relationships. See you in the next video.